and welcome to this new episode of Carolyn Talks. I am your host, Carolyn Hines, film critic and journalist. You know what? I should say film culture critic and journalist. And this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by Andrew Fredericks, who is an award-winning director, producer, editor, cinematographer. Like, he does basically everything involved with making a film. He has all of that experience. And we're here to talk a short film called Love, Jamie, directed by Karla Murthy. And it's a documentary in the new PBS special short series, American Master Shorts, in honor of LGBTQIA plus people. And this film is about Jamie Diaz and her friend, Gabrielle Joff, and the relationship they've built over the last 11 years, beginning in 2013, where Jamie, who she was incarcerated, she was scheduled to be released on May the 31st, was incarcerated for over 30 years in Texas, and they just began this letter-writing correspondence, and in the process, Gabrielle got to learn so much about Jamie as a person, but also I think the carceral system and how Jamie uses art as a way to talk about her experiences in prison and also her life as a transgender woman in prison. And Andrew is the producer, and I'm so happy to have him to talk to me. So thank you so much for joining me, Andrew. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. That was a great introduction.
Thank you. So first of all, I have to ask you how, like, you've been working with Karla for a while. Can you tell me how you both became involved with this documentary, and like, how did you find Gabrielle and Jamie and decided to say, you know what, I want to make a film about these two people?
Well, the story starts, I was at the Dan Cooney Gallery, which is where Jamie's exhibit ended up being, working on a completely different film. I've been working on an independent documentary of my own for a number of years. And Dan had an exhibit of the artist. He was a revolutionary gay artist, now deceased, named Bernard Perlin. And so I've been working on a film about Bernard Perlin. So I was there filming, and as I was wrapping up my gear, I asked Dan, what shows do you have coming up? He said, oh, I have this really interesting show by a trans woman artist, and she's incarcerated in Texas. I said, wow, that sounds interesting. And then he opened the drawer and started pulling out her artwork. And I don't know, something just moved in me, and I thought, this is fabulous. She's incarcerated and she's creating this wonderful work full of color and dignity and humor. And so I thought, this is really great. You know, this is a great story. Incarcerated trans woman in prison. I didn't know any more than that. And I thought, you know, this would make a great little news story or a short, you know. But myself, I thought, well, I don't have time to do it because I was already working on too many other things. So just based on that little bit of stuff, that little bit, what I knew, I had worked with Karla before. Our working relationship goes back. We met many years ago working for Bill Moyers, who's a journalist in here in the States, and he a lot of public television. So Karla and I have kind of worked on and off together, and I thought, well, she would be a great person to do this story because she's not just a director, she's a correspondent and a writer. So I gave the information to Karla and said, here, this would make a good story, why don't you go off and do it? And she said, okay, let me look into it. And she did. And initially it was like, yeah, this is kind of neat, you know, but wasn't sure what the heart of it is. And then so Karla talked to Dan, and Dan shared a letter with her that Jamie had written. And Karla has told this story. It's when she read that letter from Jamie and how honest it was and how heartfelt it was and how it was a person reaching out for contact. And so then she said, I think I know how to do the film. But of course we had to then contact Gabrielle because Gabrielle was Jamie's contact with the outside world and kind of vetted us. And so once Jamie and Gabriel talked to Jamie about it and gave us their blessing to make the film, it was when we started working with Gabriel that we really realized that the film is about friendship and companionship and chosen family and abiding love and all those things. They're two trans people, but that's not what the story's really about. And the power of art and connections. So I give Karla credit. She had this vision when she read that letter and then met Gabriel and started learning about the relationships, what direction she wanted to take the film in. And I was just then at her service to shoot for her, be a sounding board. That's how it went.
Yeah, the film is really just about these two people who formed such a close bond over the years. And I think them being trans, both of them being trans, is just incidental to it. Because like Jamie calls Gabriel her nephew, and she refers to herself as Gabriel's auntie. And it's just about them, how like just this one letter that Gabriel saw on the painting that Jamie does, because Jamie has this thing where she paints on her letters, she adds all of these different artistic motifs and these little themes and these pictures, and that just caught Gabriel's eye, and Gabriel was like, oh, what's this? Like, I reached out. And I think the film is really about not only about what you said about found family, but I think it's also about how important it is to take the initiative to reach out to people, because none of this would happen if Gabriel didn't take the initiative to reach out to Jamie, and it shows like how, and it's something that I'm always talking about, like we're meeting people where they're at, and also accepting them where they're at, and like not pushing them to move further beyond their own boundaries and what they're comfortable with. Because while Jamie reached out to Gabriel, Gabriel let Jamie set the pace. Gabriel lets Jamie set the pace. And something that I noticed in the documentary, like we get to hear Jamie and Gabriel talking on the phone, and I noticed, and this may be just because in the editing of the film, it's a short film, is that Gabriel lets Jamie say whatever's on her mind. She just lets out whatever she's feeling in the moment. She talks about, oh, I saw a bird today, and like the conversation is about her seeing this cardinal, and then another conversation is how she feels about being in solitary confinement. And then, like all these conversations are just like small, short conversations, because like in prison, like incarcerated people don't have much time to talk on the phone. And I think it's important that from what we see in the film, that Gabriel lets Jamie dictate the conversations. If she wants to talk about the most random things, that's what she gets to talk about. And I think that that's important, and that really stood out to me in the film, where to me it's really about how, as an incarcerated person, Jamie doesn't really get a lot of latitude. Like she has so many rules to follow. She doesn't wear makeup because she's afraid of being ridiculed, as beyond all the other ridicule that she gets as a transgender woman in a male prison. And so the fact that she's just able to have a little control in these conversations is important. Like she is the only, apart from her art, talking to Gabriel on the phone is the only mode of communication she has with the outside world. So like giving her that control is important.
That's a really wonderful observation of yours. I appreciate that. And I think that's accurate too. Of course, we can only use a small portion of the conversations they had in editing it to tell the story. But if you listen to the full conversations, that is the case, And Jamie tells wonderful stories and can talk about a range of topics that goes far beyond what's in the documentary: music, art, literature, all kinds of things, life. And I think that's one of the things, and I'm getting this from the film, that Gabriel saw in Jamie, that she was an elder, a person that had a lot of life experience and could help Gabriel and be a friend and a guide.
Yeah, she has so much. She's very intelligent, and she's not only emotionally intelligent, but I think she has a lot of world knowledge, because it shows that people who are incarcerated, or whatever situation they are, doesn't determine their intelligence and doesn't determine their ability to understand the world. In fact, like, being incarcerated gives her a completely different understanding and knowledge of the world that Gabriel, who's on the outside, doesn't have. Like, Jamie is, in some sense, she's, I think, just as free, because she uses her art as her way to show how vast her knowledge of the world is. Like, she uses so many different art genres and art styles in the painting. Some of it is art deco, some of it is impressionistic, some of it is surrealism, some of it is like has like this scientific edge. She does so many different styles, and it shows just how intelligent she is and how she sees the world in such a vast way. And I wanted to ask you, as a producer and as someone who has also directed and made your own films, like what was it like for you going through her paintings? Because the thing with paint artists, visual artists in particular, is they have to express how they see the world in a way that other people could visually understand. And for you, as a director and a producer and editor, doing all of this, you have to take the thoughts that you have in your head and the way you see the world and present it in a way for an audience to understand through film. Like, what was it like for you, like, going through her artwork, and like, how did that affect the way you thought about your own art as a filmmaker?
That's a great question. Putting putting somebody's art to words is always a risky proposition, and not an easy one, because you are then imbuing the painting that is there, that possibly had a completely different motivation or feeling when it was painted. When you put it up against words, that you're putting those two things together, you are, just by doing that, giving that painting a meaning that maybe wasn't there. So one has to be very careful with that when making a film about art. And I think Karla did a beautiful job. She edited the film to not ever make the paintings mean what we wanted them to mean, but tried to use them as an example of Jamie's view of the world and Jamie's feelings, like at different times. So as far as how it has affected my own work, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't feel like I have a good answer for that. Jamie has inspired me to be more kind of true to my own self, and maybe that will be reflected in my work. And in Jamie's work, she didn't and doesn't hide who she is or what she feels. And it's sometimes a great risk to herself while she was incarcerated. So that really made an impression on me. If Jamie can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, she used the resources that she had to, like, share her thoughts and her visions. And the thought just occurred to me is the thing that's also interesting about this film in particular, and I think versus a lot of other films about people who've been incarcerated and filmed during people were incarcerated, is in this film we don't get to see Jamie's view of prison. Everything we see is external, is from like the director's point of view, Karla's point of view, from Gabriel's point of view, the museum curator's point of view, the people who visit the exhibition. But we don't get to see Jamie while she was in prison. We don't get to see her talking about her art, and so the only thing we have is her voice and also the art to tell us her who she is, and to, like, give us this sense of who she is as a person, who she is as an artist, and her experiences. And I think for a film that where we don't actually get to see the protagonist, you guys did an extremely good job doing, like, giving us an idea of who Jamie is without actually showing us who she is, without actually showing us who she is in prison. Because, in like a lot of these documentaries, you get to see the people while they're in prison. We see them interacting with other inmates, we see them interacting with like the prison guards, with their families or whoever, but we never actually get to see Jamie. So talk to me about, as a producer now, your job in constructing a film like this where the protagonist is visually absent and she's only absent auditorily and through her artwork.
This was a conscious decision. We started going down the road of getting permission with Texas Department of Criminal Justice to film Jamie in prison. It's not an easy thing to make that arrangement for. And we talked about it and started trying it. And then Karla made the decision that if we see Jamie, show Jamie in prison, that is the image that the viewer has. She will be defined as an incarcerated person because of her surroundings, and we wanted Jamie to be seen as a person bigger than that. And there's just no way to avoid, when you show someone in prison, that the impression you have and what you're taking away is this person is incarcerated. So we stopped going down that road. And we said, Jamie will live through her art and her words, which is the way that most people who are incarcerated must have a relationship with the outside world. People don't get to go into the prison. You might be able to go to a visiting room or something if you're family.
Right.
But if you have a relationship with someone who's incarcerated, you don't get to see what their lives are like. We all have impressions of prison from movies, and how accurate that is, I can't say because I've not been incarcerated. But so that was a decision that we did not want to show Jamie and have her be defined as an incarcerated person. We wanted people to know Jamie through her art and her words and her deeds. And we saw the one picture of her and Gabriel together. And that was all. As we started working on the film and editing the film, that was all very conscious. And so I think that it was maybe fortunate that they didn't just say, yes, come on down and film, because it gave us time to think about it, and Karla making, as a director, again, I didn't direct this film. When she made that decision, we discussed it as people, creative partners do, and I agreed with it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, because like you mentioned the picture that she has with Gabriel, there's that, and then the only physical, actually it's not only just the only, but the one of the more identifiable physical representations of Jamie is like how she portrays herself in her art, like with the fancy swoop. The hairstyle kind of reminded me of the one Meryl Streep had in Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah, that's Jamie, and that is with Jamie while she was incarcerated, making a declaration. Prison is a place that is meant to dehumanize you, and it's meant to break down your dignity. And that was Jamie in full color declaring who she was, and she was proud of who she is, and to do that in a place that works in the opposite principle was really, it was courageous of her.
It is. And I think it's also very important that she gets to define who she is and what she looks like for people, because most oftentimes we don't get to do that. And giving her the opportunity to do that in the film, where you and where Karla and you and the team were like, how we're gonna let Jamie determine how the world identifies her before the world actually gets to see her. Because like first impressions are important, and like how people see us is how they perceive us, and like that's how they clock it. But for this, like when people watch the film or if they see her artwork, they meet her in person, they already have the idea from her own artwork what she looks like, and I think that's
Yeah.
very important, and it's also very, very rare. That's not something that we as human beings actually get an opportunity to do. And so I think it's very special that she got that. But another thing that really caught my eye in her artwork is the motif of doves or birds. Like she uses like doves in a very abstract way. Sometimes they're very obvious, and then sometimes it's just like it is very abstract. So like out of all of the art that's shown in the film, there's one particular painting that really catches my eye, and it made me actually pause the film to look at it. And it was, I think it's about 3-4 minutes in, where we see like the art deco, the really detailed. She does really, really detailed art pieces,
Amazing.
amazingly detailed art pieces. But there's one that's very abstract, where it's like a lot of reds and blues. But in the midst of all this reds and blues, it just looks like swoops of paint. But in this swoops of paint, there's a bird. It looks like a phoenix or an eagle. And I really love that she has this motif that she just kind of interweaves in her in her painting. And I wanted to ask you about that, like because you had to choose like which paintings, that she has so many because she wants to create the largest collection of queer art in the world. You have so much pieces to choose from. What was it about specific pieces that was chosen for the film? Like what kind of conversations did you and Carolyn, Jamie and Gabriel and Dan have about how you guys would select the paintings to show in the film? Because in the exhibition, which was called flowers, it's called Flowers Also Bleed.
Even flowers
Even Flowers Bleed,
bleed.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was 2 rooms, so just like a finite collect number of paintings. But how did you choose which ones to show for the film?
Well, first I want to say that painting that you're describing is, we've screened the film in a number of theaters, big screens, film festivals, and that painting's always a bit of a showstopper.
Mm.
You
It's
can
very visually arresting. It's just like
you can hear people when they see it. The name of that painting is called Worlds Within Worlds. And yet you do see the birds, and within there, and Jamie does use doves in her work, and I can't speak to what that symbolizes for Jamie. I can only speak to what, when I see it, the bird is, it's almost cliche, but it's free. Bird is freedom, free as a bird, free bird. I mean it, and so you'll have to ask Jamie when she would put her birds in there. But it is a motif, the cardinal that came to her window.
I was just gonna ask if
So
that's
and all, and the feathers she found to put on the painting that
right.
she made of Gabriel. So it is a motif, and so I think that we wanted to, when Karla was selecting paintings to put in the film, she would show me cuts and say, "Oh, that one doesn't really work there. What about this one?" And we were moving them around until it got to be just right. But I think that paintings that immediately have an impact are important, and ones with that continue, like you said, the motif. There might be elements in it of that motif, and then we tried to sort of subtly repeat that motif in our own visualization, like in the prison with the exteriors, by like birds sitting on the or in Boston with the little flock of birds flying away, or at the end with the credits when Jamie, so we tried to pick up on Jamie's motif and not hit anyone over the head with it, but like, be a little bit subtle about it. But the selection, there was so many to choose from, and we only have a certain amount of time. So we just tried to use the ones that had the most impact. And sometimes that's a little bit of trial and error, and sometimes there's a little disagreement. No, I remember one. Carla had one, and I said, "No, put this one in." She's like, "No,
Yeah.
I don't like that one." And so not I don't like that it because we like them all, but it didn't kind of work there.
For
Maybe
visual.
it could have been, maybe it was too obvious, and that's something too that's a real editing challenge in art form. You never want to be too obvious. You don't just want to show what you're saying. So the pictures don't want to match the words, but they don't want to fight the words either. The two things have to work complementary to each other. And that sounds very easy to say, but it's often very hard to do. And that goes for art, or it goes for narration. When you have somebody saying something and you're showing a picture,
Mm-hmm.
you don't it doesn't need to be the same thing, because then you're just wasting one or the other. But they can't fight against each other either. So
Yeah, what we're hearing has to allude to what we're seeing, like and it doesn't have to be exactly specific, because like you meant like the bird, like I'm guessing that's the reason you guys chose that particular conversation about the cardinal, because it ties in. And
mm-hmm.
like for her, like she's telling the story where the bird lands on her windowsill and it's becoming day after day. And like that's to me, I kind of like, I love birds, and like there's like pigeons on my balcony nesting. My sister is not happy because my sister's like, how are you letting these pigeons nest on our balcony? They're creating a mess. But I'm like, but they're cute and they're fluffy. Um, so like I when she told the story about the cardinal, I'm like, that's kind of like me with my pigeons, my unwanted
Yeah.
pets. My sister is gonna be so upset if she sees me say this.
And I'd say something else. Another reason that story, besides the motif of the bird, hey, guess what came to my window? The excitement that Jamie shows in that brief encounter with something from some being from the outside that I think is wonderful. And it also speaks to how much, when you are free, when you're not incarcerated, how much we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there's cardinals, there's birds outside. I live kind of in the country all the time. But for one to come to Jamie's window, we take these things for granted. And for Jamie, that experience, well, it was very, very meaningful. And so I think that anecdote also helps illustrate that. And there's a story that I'm going to repeat it because it's an experience both Carla and I had with Jamie. Is we started also having conversations with Jamie on the phone, and we both were complaining once to Jamie about, it's been so rainy here for the last month, or the last week, it's been raining. And Jamie said, when I get out of here, I'm going to go out and stand in the rain.
Puts things in perspective.
Right. And that hit me just like a hammer on the head. That was something as simple as standing out in the rain with something Jamie hadn't been able to experience for nearly 30 years, probably. And so it's really, that has made me, and I hope it makes other people when they see the film appreciate what they have, what it and what you can experience.
No, it's true. It is very much about appreciating what we have and what we could have. And the other thing that I'm thinking with I think one of the things that with the bird, this is, of course I don't know Jamie or anything, but I think one of the things that I think are really struck her, and it's kind of, and the reason I'm saying this is because cardinals are very flighty birds. Like they don't stay in one place for very long. You see them and they're gone. And but this bird was choosing to come back to her over and over. And I think that's special, where she's like, oh, it was here yesterday, the day before, and the day before that.
Yeah.
That would have an impact where it's like, she's like, this bird, this creature from the outside, this creature that's free, is choosing to sit on my windowsill and where I am, where I can't get out. So there's a symbolism in that. And then it also made me just think how it's also symbolism in someone like Gabriel taking the time to continuously reach out to Jamie, you know, where it wasn't just a one-off conversation. Like Gabriel kept coming back over and over and over again and has stayed true to that for over 10 years, you know, like Gabriel has stayed true to his word of being a support system
Yeah.
for Jamie, and showing like there's consistency. You can have consistency in your life that isn't regimented, you know, consistency in your life that isn't about rules, you know, being put in place by people. So I think there's that, and it's also about how I think for me, yeah, just as I'm talking, you know, just a reminder, like consistency is also is great, but I think it's also just again like taking the courage to step out and do new things, you know, and like continue to reach out to new people. And like it could be scary and it could be hard, but like our lives wouldn't be what they are unless we reach out to people, you know, unless we take that chance and take that leap of faith. So I think that's something that I think really stands out to me too, because again, none of this would have happened if Jamie hadn't written to the letter for the program, and if Gabriel hadn't reached out to her. And in talking about that, like we before we began recording, we were talking a bit about editing. So I was thinking, and I had said before that to me, one of the reasons I love doing interviews with filmmakers is like film is they're literally creating a world out of nothing, you know, and documentaries are a special type of beast when it comes to filmmaking, because you don't have a script to follow, you know, like you have a script that you read out, like the path you want the film to take, but like that whole writing thing can go out through the window depending on circumstances, and that happened. But and I think art as painting is the same way, you know, like an artist might have an idea of a painting one way, but then you start drawing on the canvas or painting, and like the it takes on a completely different um presence, you know, like, and like and also because art is very subjective, like what I see in a painting and what you see in a painting would be two completely different things, so we're looking at the exact same thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk to you now as just as a filmmaker yourself, like in the editing process for like not only for Love Jamie, for all the other films that you've had, like what is it about filmmaking and documentaries that draws you back into it, despite how chaotic and unpredictable it can be?
I love, as far as editing, I love that challenging creative process. I'm given a pile of material and try and bring it together in a way that sings, in a way that tells a story, both visually, informationally, emotionally. All those things have to be going on. Um, and so the challenge and the joy of doing that, it's very hard. You struggle and struggle and struggle. And then when you get it right, that you get this kind of this feeling like that that somehow it couldn't have been any other way. Like I know when things are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong, whether the shots are wrong, the voice is coming in wrong. There's something about it's not right. The structure of the film is wrong. You know, you have all the pieces and you're trying to structure it in the right way, because rarely are documentaries linear.
Yeah.
You know, some stories are where, but so many aren't. And even within those linear stories, you're not always just following a perfect
Mm-hmm.
timeline. So all those challenges bring me back to it. I find great joy in that struggle, um, and it's a difficult thing to describe, but and for me, the reward is in doing that work. Once I actually have finished a film and it's done and I've made my last edit and I make sure the sound mix is good and all that, I'll never look at the film again. Or maybe at a screening or
Yeah,
uh,
this is at a
but
festival or something. You gotta look at
right,
it.
right, but I don't have an interest in, like, I've already gotten the reward. And yes, it's nice when if you win an award or people give it accolades or they write about, those are all wonderful things. I'm not denying that, but for me, the real reward is in doing the work.
Hmm.
And so that's what brings me back to documentary film editing. I'll edit a film, but it's also a very grueling thing to really edit a film, especially like a long form documentary film. It takes so much of your headspace and your bandwidth, and sometimes for months at a time, that it's emotionally draining. It can be physically draining. It may not sound like that, but it is. And I can spend 10, 12 hours a day at my screens there editing, and it and so then I like to kind of do something else. I need to give myself breaks between editing films. So I'm lucky enough that I can shoot a little, I can direct a little, I can produce a little. So I spent a year shooting a film where I didn't edit anything, and simultaneously I was filming for Jamie. So so now I'm back into editing along a 2-hour documentary. So I like all the aspects of filmmaking, but I think that editing is kind of my favorite and what I am probably the best at.
Yeah, because the thing with editing for documentaries and editing for feature films, editing for short films and editing for feature length films are very, very different. Like with features, you have a script. You already have a script, and that helps guide the editor. Where like the director, like they already have the scene, the scene, the scene. You already know what scene is supposed to follow each
Yeah,
other.
it's
So that
storyboarded.
kind of
Yeah.
helps make the editing a bit easier because you have step one, step two, step three. Like these steps come because this scene filmed and this scene leads into this next scene and this scene leads into the next film. Whereas for a documentary, like I said, like even for films, like for instance, like using a tenant or whatever, where like timelines vary, there's still a very particular script to follow.
Oh yeah.
Because the director had a very definite beginning, middle, and end story and where they wanted it to go. Whereas for documentaries, it kind of you have an idea, but then as I say, circumstances could change the whole story completely because you don't know what can happen day by day.
Yeah.
Like there's documentaries I've done like for hot docs where they've been making films for years because they were like, how do we end this story? Oh wait, this doesn't really work as an end. Let's see what happens next week. Let's see what happens 2 months down the road because what happens 2 months down the road changes the entire film completely. And like if you stopped at the wrong point, you're like the story isn't finished. Like what happens next? So like documentaries are unpredictable, and that makes the editing process even more unpredictable. You're like, oh wait, we don't have a script. How do we make sense of this?
I often say that editing a documentary is like trying to solve a puzzle that you've created for yourself.
Yeah, you don't have
It's
don't
like,
have a picture to look at.
right, you've created this puzzle, and now you have to solve it too. And so so there's that, but there's also a thing that happens in editing a lot of films where you go in there with the idea, this is the film I want to make.
Yeah.
You have this idea in your head and you work, and you try and make that film. And eventually you reach the point where you have to make the film you have, not the film you wanted to make. But the only way to get to that point is to try real hard to make the film you wanted to make and fail. And then sometimes a light bulb goes off. Or it takes sometimes an honest, trusted colleague, someone to look at it and to just maybe even point out the simplest thing that will give you an epiphany,
right?
To change your direction or to look at it in a different way and have that kind of aha moment. And if I could just say to your point of that, the ending of the film, we finished the film in the original film, and Jamie, the card at the end said Jamie is eligible for parole. It was like a year and a half from when we completed the film to when she was eligible for parole. And then from the time we locked the film and did that first, so much happened, in terms of Jamie being eligible or not being paroled early, or being granted parole but not released. Those are two different things. You're granted it, but then you're not actually released.
Mhm.
So there's her having a stroke. Jamie
Oh,
suffered a stroke, and then she was hospitalized, and then she was given that she was granted early parole, um, but then had to wait to be released, and then was released, and all this was happening. And when do you stop making the film? Because there's always things that are going to happen next. So we left the film ending where it did, and then updated at the end about Jamie's present, condition, and where she's out. So that's joyful that Jamie is now out and recovering from her stroke and moving to the next phase of her artistic career. She just got oil paints and brushes and wants to explore, work bigger, because while she was incarcerated, there was a limit to how big she could work, and she
right.
wants to do big canvases. So, and I just spoke with her and Gabriel last night. They're together in Dallas, and you know, so the story continues. But
I
our snapshot of that section of Jamie and Gabriel's life and relationship stands
mm,
for that time.
I could see Jamie doing some life size pieces, like I would love to see what she would do. Like I mentioned the picture, like the painting you called World Within Worlds, but the Art Deco style is very interesting because like she kind of does it in this almost like studies of the human body, and like I would love to see what she would do with a life size canvas where she
Oh
takes
yeah.
like human body studies and puts it into like a life size, like, or even
Oh yeah, that would be neat. Yeah.
that would be amazing. Or even sculpting, like I could see like if she made those paintings into sculptures, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, the sky's the limit, I guess. So,
It is.
so we're part of Jamie's extended family now. I feel
Mm.
proud to say that Jamie and Gabriel's extended family.
And I think that's amazing. Like I think it's always special again where because as filmmakers you get so involved in the lives of the subjects to their documentaries, it gives you a insight into their lives. For instance, again, feature films don't have, because feature films most of them are fictional, whereas for documentaries these are real life people and real stories, and it helps you and you become involved in their stories, because you become interested in their stories, you become interested in their lives. And I think that's what makes documentaries so special. And I think because of that, that's what helps filmmakers to make films that we as viewers get to relate to people in a way that we wouldn't relate to, say for instance, if this story was dramatized, if it was fiction, if it was dramatized for like a biopic, like biopics are like completely different to documentaries, and
Yeah,
documentaries allow
yeah.
you to relate to the people differently to like a biopic.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it special, and because the film is going to be on the PBS master special, like what's next for you and
Well,
is there going to be like a premiere for it for the film, or
well, we had a premiere at Outfest LA, and that
Mhm.
was a year ago this
Yeah.
month, when we had our premiere, and that was very successful. And while we're saying awards aren't important, winning the jury award for best short documentary, I think really launched us in a great way. And so we've had a festival run, and we're done with film festivals. It was at a lot of great festivals. And then we were fortunate that the film was picked up this is the inaugural season of American Masters Shorts. And
Mm.
American Masters is the definitive public broadcasting series about artists, musicians. And so to be part of their first season of their short documentaries is such an honor. And it's this month we're film number 5 to coincide with Pride Month. That's why they saved it for June. I'm not sure what's next for the film. We would love to have a premiere, a screening, an in-person screening with Jamie present in Texas. All the other screenings, Jamie hasn't been able to be there because she was incarcerated. We always tried hard to have a recorded message. We had Jamie record a message to say to the audience. When we did a Q&A ahead of time, we had said what were the questions you would want to ask Jamie, and we got Jamie's responses. But to have a screening with Jamie actually there, I can't think of anything greater, and that would be the pinnacle for the film for me.
It would be. It would be very special for her to get to see not only reactions to like people seeing her paintings in like a museum or an exhibition hall, but also just like seeing people reacting to the film itself. And I think, as again, because we mentioned it, because she isn't physically present in the film, it'll be special to have her then physically present for a screening and get to have that experience of people interacting with her. So I think that would be special, and I hope you do get to do it.
We will.
And for you, you mentioned the film the project that you're working on. Can you talk before we wrap up? Can you talk a bit about that?
I'm working on. I can only say a little bit. I'm working on a film that that we goes back. It's really pretty amazing. Some 30 years. In 1991. Some filmmakers.
Saying 30 years sounds harsh.
Some filmmakers that I've worked with since then went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when the Briggs and Stratton engine factory closed down. And it was a time when a lot of manufacturing in the United States was moving offshore. And so there was a lot of people thrown out into the street, so to speak. They had these good paying jobs that supported a middle class and a family, and they were no longer. And so they started filming with a couple of families in Milwaukee to see how they were going to navigate this new economy where you were making, $16 an hour, and all of a sudden you're making $7 an hour. So over the course of the past 30 years, periodically, so that was in 1991, then in 1994, went back and filmed with them again in 1996, in 1998, in 2000, in 2012, so we have been tracking and editing a series of films about these two families for all those years. And we're now finishing the one that just shot in 1994, and just the span of time of watching these families grow and change and the ups and downs, both financially but personally. The kids who are little kids sitting at the table are now parents of their own. Their grandparents or great grandparents. So it's really kind of a remarkable longitudinal thing. So I'm editing now this installment, and it'll be 2 hours, and it'll be on public television.
It's like the real life version of is Richard. Is it Richard Lader's film Boyhood? Is it that one where he did like it was like 20 years or so? You were like, no, let's do one better. Let's do 30 years.
Yeah. So that's my current project that I have to get back to momentarily.
That must be a lot.
Oh yeah, it's a lot.
Okay. Oh, and you know what? Fine. So this is final question. And because of the span of that, there's so much change in the world during that time, but particularly filmmaking itself. We went from VHS to DVDs to Blu-rays to streaming, and we also went from
4:3
film to digital to like IMAX and all of this. So I think it would be interesting, like for you, like what has it been like seeing the progression of film? Just the film itself and making the film, like the coloring, the grading, the everything changed. Everything it would be different.
All those things are laid out before me. There's besides the technical nature of the film, the first stuff was shot in 4:3 on two Betacams. Yeah, on Betacam. And so everything from the technical and the technology, the change in that. But for me, it's also so clear the change in the style of shooting,
Mm.
from the style of verite shooting has changed over the years. Editing styles have changed. Pacing has changed. And so now for us to try and consolidate into that a film, for me, those changes are very obvious, but we're trying to not have them, look as obvious. But sometimes you just can't help it. Sometimes your editing style is dictated often by the material.
Mm.
And the way those early films were edited in 1991, 94, 96 is so much a different approach than the way I'm editing the film now. But I'm trying to keep it a little stylistically consistent. Although someone with a keen eye will know that the use of music has changed a lot. There's a lot that has changed in our craft over the past 30 years, and it becomes clear to me when you string it all out.
Yeah.
When you string it all out together.
The change in film just within like the last 5 years itself is very different. But for 30 years, just thinking back to how film looked in the 90s, because every Saturday night I co-host what we call a live tweet with a friend of mine. Like we have like people like they join us and we live tweet sci-fi films. And we do sci-fi films and shows and everything. Like right now we're going through season 2 of Farscape. But when we look at how film itself just looks different on screen now, it kind of like blows our mind. And Farscape was just in the mid 2000s, but we've done films from the 50s, we've done films from the 60s, 70s, like all the decades. And like we just have a lot of our conversations about just how older films hold up better than films made with probably within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
They look better on screen, and like they may look aged, but they look better to us and they look more realistic to us. And I think a lot of that's because we've experienced that age ourselves. We've lived through the time period, so we like, oh yeah, this feels more realistic to us. And like so it's just like fascinating, and I think it'll be fascinating. But like when you finish that, send it to me because I love to watch it, because just strictly from having lived grown up in the 90s and lived and see how film itself has changed, that fascinates me as a critic and also just as a fan of film, just like how film itself has evolved and how filmmaking styles have evolved. Filmmaking styles are not the same now as they were different back then. And I think a lot of it has nothing to do with the technology, but the culture, like our culture is very social media, it's very much about social media, quick watches and that kind of stuff. So filmmaking style is
the pacing
in self pacing
has changed enormously. The patience people have, like things are much faster now. And also we have more, as an editor, you have so many more tricks, so many more gadgets to rely on. My Avid, it's full of all kinds of things that sometimes people rely on in lieu of story, in lieu of craft. When in doubt, throw some on there.
It's true.
And it gets you out of a jam, but it doesn't make it a better story. And a quick example of that is when they first started digital editing, and you could make a dissolve, right? You could just do it yourself. It didn't have to go to an optical house or anything. You could do it yourself. I even look at my old work from 1994. I'm like, why did I put a dissolve there? I would never, ever put a dissolve there now. It's because I could. So I did. And yes, like dissolves. The other thing is zooms. If you look back in through the 80s into the 90s, zooms. Everyone's zooming. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Zoom in, zoom out. And you rarely see that anymore. That's something, because so many people are using prime lenses now, so you're not zooming there. You can do a little optical zoom, but anyway, so yes, this style pacing has changed a lot. We don't have patience anymore for just watching something. It's like you need a voice to come in. You need
and a lot of it framing for, especially the last 3-4 years, I've noticed a lot of films are framed for TikTok. They're framed for social media. They're framed they're framed so that you can say like this particular scene and dialogue was made so it can become a meme, or a GIF, like quick
Interesting.
bite edits and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Watch me
Well,
just like and
I'll have to keep an eye out for that. That's a really good observation. I have to now I'm gonna be alerted to that. So thank you.
Netflix films and Disney films in particular, like structured that way. So like keep your eye out for that. But but it's been great talking to you. Again, really, Sammy, I would love to see that film when you're finished.
Okay, I will send you. I'll send you. When it's done, I will alert you, and also anyone that wants to learn more about Jamie, her art. JamieDiazArt.com.
And is the film available for your screen?
Yes, yes. At PBS, if you go to pbs.org or to American Masters, you will be able to find the film American Master Shorts. Just look at that, and it's right up there in the front. And you can learn a lot more about it.
As soon as I asked, it was like, "But Carolyn, you know this."
Yeah. So, well, it was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Time for talking with me and for not only taking the time for talking with me here, but like the chat we had before, like that was very interesting too. And I'm always so happy to be joined by people who take their time out of their very busy days. For you, your busy day of editing 30 plus years of footage to chat with me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. That was another episode of Carolyn Talks, and this is my interview with producer and filmmaker Andrew Fredericks to talk about the short film Love, Jamie, directed by Karla Murthy. And it's about, I believe Jamie's 66 years old now. It's about Jamie's time while she was incarcerated and how she sees the world through art and how she uses her art to communicate with her friend Gabrielle Joff, who she's known for 11 years, and about their special relationship and about Jamie's art. And I appreciate Andrew taking the time to talk with me about that, but also a bit to talk about his perspective as not only as a producer, but as an editor and a filmmaker, because he has his own films that he's written and directed and also edited, as we discussed at the end. And it was great to get his perspective, and not just a producer, as an editor. And we even had that little conversation at the end talking about how film has changed over the last 30 years. So that was a very interesting conversation. And of course, you'll find the video version of this on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@Carolyn_Hinds. That's HINDS. And I'm on social media, Twitter and Instagram @Carrie, CNH12, CARRIECNH12. My prior interview for the podcast, Carolyn Talks, is an interview that I did with Japanese filmmaker Uchiha Eiji to talk about his film Match. At the end of that interview, I kind of forgot to do my outro. So if you listen to that interview, you'll realize that it doesn't have my usual outro, kind of like this. But that was a really good discussion. We didn't have that much time, but it was a really great opportunity to talk to him about that. And his film had its North American premiere at the 2024 Toronto Japanese Film Festival held by the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center. So you'll see that interview there, and other interviews that I've done for last year and the year before are also in my in my list of Carolyn Talks podcast, and as well as on the YouTube channel. And also I've been covering the Shorts Film Festival and Asia held in Japan for K-Crush American Magazine. So you'll find interviews for that. Like I've been covering both those festivals at the exact same time. So my interviews have now started going out. So you'll find those interviews on the kcrush.com website, as well as on the K-Crush American Magazine YouTube channel. So go there and watch those. You'll see interviews that I've done with filmmakers from Canada. One who is Netta Sarsha, who's Iranian Canadian, Nguyen Hong An, who is from Vietnam. Her film Saigon Kiss, which I really love. We had a really good discussion. And interviews that I've done with Japanese filmmaker Ikeda K about his film To I, and there will be a few more that will be published there, as well as interviews from the Jeonju International Film Festival that will be published throughout June going into July, because I had a lot. But again, thank you so much to Andrew. Thank you so much to Karla for making this film, and for Jamie and for Gabriel for their time and their dedication, their love for each other, but also for art, and for agreeing to make this beautiful film. And go on the PBS website. It's a PBS Master Short. It's their special series to honor people in the LGBTQIA+ community for Pride Month. So I'll wrap here. So until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone stay safe. Bye.